Good afternoon. Thanks for sticking out through the day, coming to our panel on Craigslist effect. We're going to talk a little bit about the phenomenon of sort of the personal brand. How can you take a hobby, how can you take an idea and effectively turn it into a personal enterprise, which really involves a lot of different sort of emerging issues, emerging ideas out there, things like the transformation of old media to new media. How do you actually reach people? How do you keep people entertained? How do you keep them coming back? How do you effectively sort of bring your viewers into the fold without necessarily alienate them, while at the same time trying to monetize what it is you're actually trying to put together? We've seen a number of very, very impressive examples of individuals with an idea that have actually been able to build a pretty significant personal enterprise around it. And it's due in large part to effectively the democratization of what we see out there today of branding, of getting a message out, the tools that are now available to build that brand. And we'll talk a little bit today about these subjects themselves. I would like all the panelists to actually introduce themselves, because otherwise we'll undoubtedly destroy their company's capabilities and most specifically their names. So why don't we start at the outside with you, Walker?
My name is Walker Fenton. I work at NewsGator, and I'm the general manager of our private label business.
It might also help just a real quick sense of, NewsGator, what it does, and just give everybody a sense of that.
Yeah, we're an RSS platform company. Well, I'll leave it at that. We got to get going on content.
Sounds good. My name's Eric Newman. I'm the general manager for Portal Solutions at Pluck Corporation, a little company out of Austin, Texas. We provide social media solutions to publishers, media sites, and portals, namely in kind of two areas. One is we help blogs get connected with traditional media through a syndication network we call Blogburst, have about 2,000 blogs covering a variety of topics from around the world. And we bring those to publisher sites that they can drop and orient around their content. We also have a product line called SiteLife, which is designed to bring MySpace-like functionality, really driving towards user-generated content and conversation onto publisher sites, media sites, and portal sites. So for example, sites like TELUS, a portal up in Canada, is using our Blogburst product today to bring travel content to their site. We have sites like the Houston Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle, and others who are leveraging our products today to get users engaged, to have them build content, and to drive everything back to kind of a centralized persona or a picture of that user where anybody can go visit, see all the comments they've made, their blog posts, et cetera, on their site.
Great. Bill?
Name is Bill Flitter. I am one of the founders of a company called Fido, and basically what we do is syndication and revenue strategies around RSS. So we help publishers and advertisers create revenue strategies if they have RSS, and then also deliver the publisher's content and distribute that throughout our network to drive more traffic to their sites.
I'm Mike McGuire. I'm a research vice president at Gartner DataQuest. I am currently working in mobile media, looking at changes in that space in the mobile area being driven by changes in the media, both ends. I've also spent the last 5 years looking at the overall media industry. We've done a series of reports regarding media titans and consumer-generated content, and I have a particular interest in areas of podcasting and video podcasting.
Great. And also, just to sort of round it out, my name is Howard Kashansky. I'm the founder and president of a company called Umbria. We provide market research around companies, people, products, ideas, concepts, entertainment discussed on things like weblogs, message boards, and the like. So I think we've got a pretty good representation of new media out there today, or consumer-generated content, and how people can actually use that information. So let's start with some basic fundamentals. I mean, and actually, Mike, you might be the right person to start with. What are the available vehicles through which people can create that online enterprise? Thoughts on how would somebody actually, what are the vehicles that are available to actually get out there and start building that brand?
Well, I think the simplest two vehicles I would say would be a blog. finding a good blog hosting service, or starting out with something like blogger.com, for example. And I think podcasts increasingly are an even easier way to extend the brand, especially when you start using in both of those vehicles the powers of RSS and the ability to link and easy for people to easily subscribe. I think both of those tools are very easy ways for people to get into the ability of, getting their point of view or their information out to a large number of consumers, potentially, if you follow the right steps of creating the right kind of search terms, keywords, et cetera, and working with the right kinds of RSS feeds.
Any additionals from the panel?
I want to take a different approach to that question, and if you think about, I guess it was in the title of what Craigslist did, right? He created a community, but what he did is he did something different than what was available, kept it real simple, and to me, it's not about the platform it's on. He's not on a blog, right? He just added RSS recently, but he was already popular at that point. He just offered a really good service, and you could say, well, just write very good content or have very good content and make sure that you're reaching the target market, and that's really where to start. Make it available to them. Make it easy for them to access that content. If it's RSS or if it's email, or don't think that your content needs to live on whatever platform that you create. Because if you think that way, I think that was. Am I going to be the first one to say it? Web 1.0. Now we're Web 2.0. I promise. Let's keep mashup down to a limit in this panel. But don't get caught up in the idea that if you're, and of course it depends on what your objectives are. But I always say set your content free. Right? You're creating it. Don't think about just driving traffic to your site. Think about using maybe RSS to syndicate that content out to other places that might be a good match for that, or making it just easy to access by people.
Do you think, Bill, that it makes a difference, the sort of the form, depending upon the audience that you're trying to reach, the vehicle, does that make a difference as well?
Yeah, I think so. At least right now, at least in my world, where every day I'm in the RSS world, and is it as popular as email? No, right? Is it scaling towards that? Yeah, there's definitely growth in that particular area, and I never would tell a publisher, well, only offer your content via RSS, because I think that's suicide. You need to offer them, again, it's all about how easy is the content to access. Right? Is it email? Is it RSS? It appeals to two different markets, right? You might have the technology savvy person subscribing to feeds, or you just have someone might have more of affinity to email and use that, and are still comfortable just using email.
It's an interesting concept. I mean, also this notion of, I think, is it a foregone conclusion? Eric, maybe you should jump in on this one. Is it a foregone conclusion that you can only do this online? Does it have to be online, or is it possible to actually build that brand somehow offline?
Well, define online. When you say online, are you saying just on the web? Or are you saying, because I have web on my phone, is that online? Is my TV, which, has a web component to it, is that online? Or are you just trying to define something that is experiential on the web only, or on your computer?
Yeah, so the web brings a level of interactivity that you don't see in the offline world, but the two worlds actually can work really well together. So what we have, for example, are many bloggers out there who are looking as their payout as the book deal, right? Or as the opportunity to be presented on television in a newscast, something along those lines, as a means to develop themselves personally, to build the attention sort of value that they have, that their name gets, and the blog can be a mechanism for doing that. Another big part of it is that, as I said before, opened it up with, the online world opens up a level of interaction that you don't see in the offline world. And the ability to allow users to come in and participate is actually half, or sometimes more than half, the fun in a lot of these different websites today. And they've built themselves up around the community. TechCrunch, great example. tremendous blogger, very successful. The commentary that goes on around his posts are as valuable as the posts themselves. And that's a big part of how, I use bloggers as an example, but you can find the same dimension in what we might call message boards traditionally, or forums, that kind of thing. The model still holds. That interactivity drives a lot of value to the equation.
Other comments from the panelists on that?
But if we continue on this vein of talking about creating a brand maybe around a personality, or what Craigslist did, TechCrunch is another good example, a more recent example where, well, why was he successful? In my opinion, it was the content that he wrote. He reviewed new startup companies and built a following around that. But I don't know if it's because he's a good writer, or you could get new startup information or reviews, and maybe.
Well, I think the key point is, he had a point of view and a set of objectives that he was trying to, that he had when he's created that, and he stuck to them. And I think that's the first thing before you figure out what vehicle it is. What is your point of view? What is the information or the topics that you want to cover, and you have to stick to that. Audiences have certain expectations, whether it's a multi-million individual TV broadcast or a blog that drives 20,000 RSS feeds.
And it just occurred to me what you just said here. If you look at a site called eHub, and it's a woman who basically covers the same market as TechCrunch, and she's pretty popular herself, but it's the style that, I don't know if you read that one, but it's the style and how it's written. An eHub, it's just links and the facts that link out to the site, and where TechCrunch, it's more in depth, right? But both approaches are pretty successful. And I read both of them, and usually read them back to back in my newsreader. And there's, I just read what TechCrunch just covered. I just read about that in eHub, but I use them differently, meaning, okay, what's launched today, what's cool, let me go to eHub quick. Oh, I have time, let me sit back and read someone's opinion about this particular startup. So, two different approaches, and it depends about me, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So at the heart of this, I think, the fact is that Craigslist and TechCrunch and all these other different examples provide a value to the user which, isn't met in other media. And I think at the core of that is two parts. One is content, and the other is functionality. Content in terms of, timeliness of content, relevance of content, community, and then from the functionality standpoint, there's personalization, there's alerting, there's mobility, there's ease of use. All of these are things that have kind of, the stars have aligned, and I'm sorry to say it, in this Web 2.0 type of environment that we're,
I'm keeping track, so I know
that's really providing a differentiating experience for users, and that's why they're flocking to these types of sites versus, old media.
But does it have to be, that's always been the gold standard. It's content. That's what's going to get somebody, it's going to keep them. But, you look at, why TechCrunch? Why not 3 or 4 or 5 others that have equally valid opinions? Why do you go there as opposed to someplace else? What are the vehicles that people use effectively to get your eyeballs?
Well, I think it does start essentially with a very distinct point of view. His voice is unique. Mm-hmm. You can go find lots of interesting reports on the same kinds of either a given company or something. They can be very dry Wall Street kind of reports or simple news reports. People go to sites like that because he has that particular one, because he has a specific way of presenting his point of view. Tends to be pretty snarky, and very hard-edged. Whereas, again, you were pointing out the eHub model, which is the same kind of content, but it's a more very dry, very specific link-to-link, no personalization there. And I assume when you say you use it differently, do you read hers first?
I do.
And then you go.
I read it because it's alphabetized.
Oh, it's alphabetized. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think point of view is very important, whether that's a video blog or a podcast or just a straight text blog.
Right.
That's what happens, and you get eyeballs, not simply because you're really good at gaming the keyword search. tools, but it's, in effect, you know, you can do that for a while to get people to show up, but if you're not delivering something of interest consistently, you're going to lose your audience
Well,
over time.
this question always comes up, and hopefully the panel can answer this for me too. But how does GM create that same thing, and can they? Are there good examples of a tech crunch within a technology company? Maybe Microsoft, with Robert Scoble is a good example. But
Well, not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, not anymore. Yeah. But how do larger companies do that? And is there a formula, or is it just organic and it happens? So.
I mean,
Is there a formula for grassroots passion
Yeah, is it,
in
right?
big
That's what
companies?
everybody's asking for, right?
Yeah.
And they want to know
Well,
what the formula was.
And does it have to be? I mean,
And does it have to
is
be,
it
yeah.
that edge, and once you become the man, do you lose your audience because, you know, you no longer have that edge, you know,
Right.
you're worried about sort of the revenue side of the equation all of a sudden?
You know, it's interesting. There was a conference I went to recently, specifically for women bloggers, called BlogHer, and one of the things they talked about there, very hands-on kind of experience. One of probably 10 guys out of 400 women there was quite
Was that a pun?
Yes. But yeah, let's not go there. But the interesting part about it is the sessions were very focused on how to become a better blogger, because BlogHer in particular are prosumer type bloggers, where they're starting to grow out of just kind of a general diary into something more. And they really focused on the usefulness of content, the entertainment value of content, and the pitch angle that you take. And any one of those three things can carry a blog. And so in the corporate world, you're going to lose the snarkiness. I just don't see that large corporations are going to be focused there. But certainly you have the ability to provide a lot of really useful information to your users. Take a technology company that offers mobile hardware. A blog can be a really useful place to get latest updates on the products that they sell, offers they have, support information. There's a tremendous value of content that they can offer there that has very little to do with the pitch itself, although you want it to feel like it is personal to the user in a sense. And so there's an opportunity there, I think, for anybody to participate in this world. It's just going to be a timeline thing where it's more of when it becomes more mainstream, it's just a communication vehicle, a way of writing, right? What's a blog? A blog's just a content management system like anything else. Your blog posts could be long and involved, and we have a blog in our network called The Oil Drum, which does in-depth analysis of the oil industry. It's as dry as anything you can imagine, but the guys in Houston love it because it's the oil space, and all the oil guys live there, and they really want to read that kind of content. Whereas if you're a different audience member, somebody interested in gadgets, is going to be more familiar with the Gizmodo and gadget style language that they use that is very snarky, and appreciate that. So very much about audience specifics.
Yeah, I think the perspective that we're forgetting here is the editorial role that people have these days. You know, one of the things that we are promoting within, you know, our tool set, within Newsgator tool set, is the ability to layer in content, to layer in RSS within, you know, an editorial vision of a mainstream media company. So, you know, it's not just that, you know, a GM has to, you know, assign their own people to generate their own news. They can take content, you know, using RSS and other technologies like that to provide a perspective on a topic or a category that is unique, because it's more you know, production. It's more DJing of news rather than like, you know, composing your own stuff.
But aren't most successful corporate blogs effectively not even necessarily about, they're not commercials, they're not about the company itself necessarily? You know, you think about Stonyfield Farms.
Define successful corporate blog.
That's later down the road. But certainly, you know, that's a fair question, because we will be sort of defining both success personally and from a corporate standpoint. But many blog sites, corporate as well, it seems like if you were just to look at, for example, viewership as a metric, that these are companies that don't necessarily, the bloggers that don't necessarily talk about what's going on with the product, what's going on within the company's bowling trip. Nobody cares about that necessarily. They're interested, you know, in the example of Stonyfield Farms, is they talk about organic farming. They never talk about necessarily Stonyfield's yogurt. Why is it different in a corporate setting versus a personal setting, where you can kind of go off into these personal, soliloquies that all of a sudden are entertaining, whereas in a corporate space, it just doesn't fly?
Practical matter, it's corporate legal and corporate PR, right? I mean, that's part of the problem, and I think we've all seen that with a lot of the corporate blogs, is they tend to get neutered after a while.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that, I believe, with the fellow at GM, one of the GM execs, and the fellow, I believe, Walmart also.
Yep.
Had, was very folksy. A lot of people really liked it, till he became too folksy and too blunt. And it was immediate. They were both immediately shut down, because it's a very difficult line that a corporation walks. It was interesting that Microsoft allowed Scoble the leeway that he had. And I thought that was very effective use of it. A lot of companies are going to be very difficult about that, because in reality, a lot of CEOs give a very nice appearance when they're out in public, but when they let their guard down and try to be too personal, corporate legal gets very nervous, and so does corporate PR. And that's why you see Stonyfield is very good about just simply talking about the issue of organic farming in a kind of informational way, as opposed to applying too much personality to it.
Right. Sure. So let's answer that effectively, that question. I mean, what is success in both a personal and a corporate blog? And let's start with a personal one. How do you define it? How do you measure it? Go ahead, Eric.
So we just actually, timing's really good. We just finished a survey where we talked to about 600 bloggers and did all kind of a double-blind survey and really kept it as accurate as possible. And what we found is that what the bloggers measure themselves, well, first of all, you ask them why they blog. Number one reason, hands down, to inform and entertain over any other purpose that you might imagine. Now, this is from a pretty broad cross-section of kind of prosumer type bloggers, and as well as some diarists. The other question that we asked that I thought was really relevant was what your sort of number one need is out there more than anything else. Is it money? And surprisingly, the answer came back, not really. That's not why most of these folks, even the prosumer guys, are doing it. What they're more interested in is traffic and attention. And I think that's a really interesting take on this, because what we expected was money across the board, but that was not the case, even with guys who were starting to head into that kind of professional level of content. So
I think you could call it fame or attention, but it's also it's a way for an individual to put their stamp on the
Absolutely.
culture, which is increasingly difficult to do.
Yep.
In a very kind of processed world that we live in. And I think you're absolutely right. I'm not surprised with those results. It's how do I get my point of view out there?
Absolutely.
And where did money fall on the list?
Third, after sort of like traffic, and then general kind of credibility around my name, my brand, and then the third one was money.
Dating, where'd that fall on the list?
Well, certainly there's an expectation that if I have a strong brand, then maybe the dates will come.
Was it money directly from the blog itself, or like perhaps I'm going to get a better job, or
in
the New York Times is going to discover me?
Most cases, yeah. When I say money, I mean that was the least important in terms of getting direct revenue from a blog. What is more important is what the opportunity brings of exposure and traffic for their sites, which is to get another job, to get a book deal, to get speaking engagements, whatever it might be. We've certainly seen some blogs, as an example, that have grown into real professional organizations. Jossip is a blog on celebrity gossip, and the founder of Jossip has now moved into a purely editorial role and has a number of writers working for him. Spot On is another one that's a very professionally oriented content blog with, I think they're up to about 10 writers right now, and so they're growing that. Even though it's still a losing proposition for them, they're not making money at this time, they see where that can be of value in the future.
But is there a sort of a bucketing? One second. Is there a bucketing effectively? The survey that you guys conducted, is it sort of that general, let's analyze the motivations behind all bloggers that sort of pass through, under your microscope, versus, the Uber, sort of the big brands.
Right.
What are the motivations of the big brands, the people that have really been successful out there? First off, did your survey make any demarcation between those two groups?
What we tried to do was come up with a model that used traffic and money as a measurement, and so we looked at folks that had been kind of on the low end from a traffic and monetization perspective, and those that were on the high end. We only had a small group of what you might call A-list blogs in this particular survey. But their results weren't much different than the other guys. It's really interesting when you come down to why they're engaged, why they're doing this. It's for the same basic reasons. In addition to that, Pew had a report that came out recently that did a much broader survey with several thousand bloggers from probably wider than ours was, because it was all walks of life. And they came out with results that weren't too far off of what we saw too. So having said all that though, it's not that money isn't a motivation, it's just that it's not the ultimate goal right now. And I think as this becomes more mainstream and we do work out all the business models over time, and the ads and feeds like what Vito does, or distribution to mainstream publishers like we do, as all that kind of grows and matures, I think it will become more commonplace. It's just not there today.
But Bill, you may have some thoughts on this. I mean, what about those Uber brands? I mean, not even just necessarily A-list bloggers. A-list bloggers are out there, obviously, with an opinion, looking in many cases to educate, to shape society, shape opinion, things like that. But Craigslist, it's obviously a very, very valuable brand today. Is it money, or do they still hold some of those altruistic, sort of reasons for getting out there?
I was thinking about this last night, and I always had this thought about Craigslist, and they have all kinds of classifieds. 98% of them you can be listed for free, and they monetized one of them, one cross section of that, or one section of that, which was help wanted. Mm-hmm. Right now, if it was all about money, I think he could make more money. Right? What is his revenue? 20 million.
20 million. That's
20
what I
million?
think my latest number is.
Yeah, so $20 million just on selling classified. He could probably get another 5, 10, maybe even double his money if he created a way of generating revenue of the same model across all classifieds. But then what would he have? Would he have just your average site, your average classified site? Is that what would come out of that? And that's an interesting question. I don't think it's all about money either, and I think Craigslist is probably one of those companies that is kind of holding true to that. I mean, he's got enough money in his pocket, and you talk to him and you hear him and you see some of the things that he is doing. He could easily turn the money machine on that, and he hasn't.
Well, I think actually it's a little hard. I mean, I think you're right, technically, and from a development perspective, sure, flip the switch. But while we're all speaking for Craig, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea, he's staying true, as you were pointing out, staying true to his brand, and they're going to be very careful about maintaining that brand promise in terms of extending beyond what they're doing in terms of turning other revenue streams on, which I think is admirable.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That was his brand, right? And it goes back to what is success of Craigslist or anything like Craigslist or these blogs or any forums. How do you measure success? If you're GM, right? Well, I came to my boss at GM and said I want to create a blog, and he's going to say, well, what's the ROI on that, right? I'm going to pay you to focus on writing content for this blog, and you're going to have to come up with some fancy formula that at the end of the day, there's not necessarily any direct revenue from that, but there might be indirect. And the indirect revenue from GM came from all the press they got about doing that blog, right? There's a limited shelf life for that type of press. Deuce, same thing. She was a woman who got fired for blogging and what she said on her blog, and now she's making an income where her husband could come home from work, and they blog full time now. So she just got a lot of traffic, and she makes money on ad revenue, but her content hasn't changed any. She's still the same person, and she's probably happier because she's home with her family and her husband's home with the family.
So is there consensus among the panelists that it really is, that the motivator is not necessarily the check at the end of the day? It's not running a business?
Well, there's folks who've tried that, where it was, Andrew Sullivan, for example,
Sure.
as a writer, tried or made a run at it to make money for about a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, and finally he realized that wasn't allowing him to live in the lifestyle to which he'd been accustomed.
Yeah.
But no, I think and I don't know how long this persists, but I think we're always going to see for those first two responses in most surveys are always going to be, I want to get my point of view across and I want to put my stamp on the culture.
Yeah, we're still in the bleeding edge here.
Right.
We're still in
Right.
the very, very early stages of this stuff. So there is a lot of passion, and early adopter phase is all about passion and furthering the
and
technology.
to go on the money thing, we're an advertising network, so when we're not delivering money, they get upset, right? So, I mean, I don't think it's a cut and dry. I mean, some of the bloggers we talked about here are in our network, and they're the first ones to call when they don't get their check, or why is it late, or how come my revenue dropped, right? And
They're holding you responsible for viewership?
they're holding us responsible for revenue, right? Ad dollars to their site. So they forget to check their logs. That says, well, their viewership dropped by 50%, but that's not my problem, right? To say it's not about money. I mean, my accountant would be laughing at that because she takes those phone calls. So, but I don't. Maybe it's not the first thing. At least they didn't start that way, right? Deuce didn't start her blog to say this blog is gonna bring my husband home, and here's my business strategy to do that, and I'm gonna market the heck out of this blog. What did she do? Well, she got fired, which made her famous, I guess, which got press. Again, limited shelf life on that, but we're on the bleeding edge, right? I always think our company's way behind, and right? We all do right up here, but we're at the very edge, and now it's moving from I'm going to create a blog to get press to okay, I'm going to create a blog, and now I need a business strategy behind that. What is my motivation? Because the days of creating a blog and getting press about it, they're limited, I think.
And, we see, to Walker's point, I mean, we are certainly in the early stages of this, but, what about the Christina Dolces on MySpace? Here's somebody who clearly is using this as a vehicle to build an enterprise to sell a number of things. Clearly a business. Are we going to see more of that over time?
That's the expectation. I mean, the first and foremost problem that most bloggers have is how do they rise up out of the long tail, all the noise and clutter that's there. But you take that and start to really turn it into something that's a little more formulaic, a business model, if you will, and it becomes about generating a marketing presence for yourself, which I think a lot of us here are engaged in that chain somewhere along the line to help bloggers, writers, branded blogs from corporations, whatever it is, build that reach that they need for their blog. And so, I mean, ultimately, you might think about it as exposure and traffic ultimately lead to money if you
Customer acquisition.
Exactly. If you have any business sense at all, and certainly that's a logical step for anybody who's going down that path.
Right, I would say one of the ones I've been watching is, are you guys familiar with Daring Fireball? I don't know.
No.
It's more of a Mac specific blog. And he asks, he puts the tin cup out, hoping you donate.
Right.
But he's got the first best step. He's got really cool T-shirts. He's got merchandise. And I think, that's one ancillary way to start driving the revenue, hopefully. Again, he's got to deliver content that people find valuable over time.
Right.
But one of the, one thing could be, get a really cool T-shirt.
Or a sticker for
Or
my laptop.
sticker's always nice, too.
Stickers.
But
But do people run the risk of alienating themselves or alienating their viewership effectively? If you start off as I'm all content, right? And then, maybe I'll contact Bill and see if I can't make a little bit of money so I can provide more content on a more regular basis.
Yeah, it's called selling out. I mean, it's the same thing as, the music business or any other, you get your grassroots and then you sign a record deal and you're a slave to somebody else then.
And is it a cycle? Is it a sort of, self-fulfilling prophecy? I mean, do you actually end up losing your audience?
Yeah, I don't think it's as dark as. Sorry.
selling out.
I don't think it's that
kind of
dark.
harsh.
Why not, right? If you have a popular blog, or whatever you want to call it, why not, right? If I can make $100, $200. I'll tell you what happened. There's a good story where we started putting ads in feeds. Ads and feeds were feeds, first of all, 2 years ago were read by a highly technical audience. You start putting ads in that environment, you can imagine what happened. The best email we got on this was, I wish a plague upon you and your family and your home, right? But I expected that. I knew that was going to happen. Same thing happened to Wired. The same exact thing happened to Wired when they put the first banner ad on top of their website. Knew it was going to happen. But now as we're moving along 2 years later, I kind of expect, and this is coming from consumers, I kind of expect you to put ads in there because I know you need to create a revenue stream so you can keep on writing this good content. So are they extremely happy about it? No. Are the ads converting for the advertisers? Yes. And I think the expectation is as you move along, it's like, okay, well, we're used to it, right? It's everywhere. It's on TV. It's now getting on my telephone. It's on the radio. It's on the internet. It's accepted. So I think you have to. I don't think it's selling out. I just think you're creating a revenue stream, and some of our bloggers make $50 and they're so excited about that. Others make $10,000 a month, and they're really excited.
Have there been once you reach a certain size, once you reach sort of that mega, that enterprise level, are there flame out examples of people that kind of push the envelope too hard on turning it into economics for them?
Sullivan probably is one of the better examples, the lasting example, I think. I think we're yet to see a lot of in terms of the revenue driving ones. It'll be curious as we head into this election year. For example, it'll be interesting to see what happens to the Huffington Post, which has been driving pretty significant ad revenue, I think. I don't know what the numbers are, but they're posting regular ads.
Right.
And I think this will be, since I think that's kind of the crux of that site's mission is, heavily political, very specific perspective. I'm interested to see what they do, at the end of the election cycle. But I think there's going to be more. Sure, there's always going to be flameouts. Mainly, and I don't know that it's really probably going to come from the hard part about doing a blog or a podcast. Mm-hmm. That's sitting down in front of the screen or the microphone every day or at some regular period and creating something. It's really hard to do.
I think another thing that'll be kind of interesting is
if you're making money at trying to.
That's true. Well, along those lines, it'll be interesting to watch where MySpace goes. So we know about the Google deal, and that one's pretty straightforward for them. But as they start thinking about and dropping ads in all over the place on their blogs, most of those MySpace blogs are already pretty obnoxious looking. But as you start to add blinking banners and Punch the Monkey and everything else on there, it'll be very interesting to see how the youth market, which they're targeting kind of that 18 to 34, 18 to 24 range market, how they react to was effectively kind of selling out. What up till now has sort of felt like theirs. It may not be quite the case as that grows. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens there, and the approach they take, I think, will be an important model, good or bad, for others to look to in terms of monetizing sites like that.
And it's not. I mean, you don't think people will sort of recognize that it's MySpace that's effectively running the business as opposed to the individual bloggers, and that they're providing a service and they're entitled to generate some revenue from it.
MySpace is unique because it's not really a blogging platform. I mean, they have a sense of blogs on there, but it's really more about personal interaction and social networking, which is very personal by its nature, and that has a slightly different feel to it than someone who's really being a contributing author somewhere, where you expect that someone needs to foot that bill. MySpace may not feel that way if it goes too commercial, I guess is the way to think about it.
So these kids who are wearing, whatever brands, American Eagle, Abercrombie and Fitch, all over their clothes are going to be bothered by banner ads on their MySpace sites?
No, probably not, but they might not be too excited about Vonage ads and things that are more of the kind of standard run-of-the-mill things you see on many sites today. So like I said, the way they do it, whether it's taking very high-quality branded items or brands and associating with it, or coming up with a brand new model altogether will have the ultimate impact on it, is what I'm saying. So it's something that's worth watching to see how it develops.
And do you think that companies have that sophistication, that, sort of the marketing arms have that sophistication of really understanding how to integrate themselves into a social network as opposed to sell to a social network?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know that they're going to have that kind of control, the kind of fine-grained control to be able to really drop into a site or a page that isn't too, out of sync with the marketing message. I think that's going to be very interesting to see how they try to control that.
Well, marketers will set up their own MySpace pages, right? So
Sure.
somebody called that the
Haven't they
marketer's
already done
hack
that?
earlier, right? It's already
Yeah,
happening.
they've already done it.
But in terms of how ads will flow through there, yeah, there won't be a lot of control, right? It'll be like any other ad system in place. And how marketers sort of get engaged with this is going to be a bumpy process, I think.
So maybe MySpace will contact 20 million people and say, you have to mention Coca-Cola in your next post.
There you go.
It'll be product placement.
That would be impressive. Randomly insert the word.
You have to give credit
Yeah.
to the ad salespeople at MySpace, though. At least they're trying something different, right? Not just putting I know they're doing this, they're putting a 468 at the top of the website on MySpace, but at least they're trying something different and trying to leverage the medium for what it's really good at, which is creating a community. And these sites, was it Taco Bell? I don't know, somebody created one, Wendy's, Burger King, I don't know. One of
You mean
them.
the subservient
Yeah,
chicken one?
no, the one that there was a big ad campaign, I think it was Wendy's, that was on MySpace, and they created a social network, and you could join the Wendy's social network, right? At least it's trying to get there, and people did it. People joined the Wendy's social network, and I don't know, after that, I don't know what you could do on it, but at least it is something a little bit different than a 468 on top of a banner or whatever, standard IAB stuff. Right, you have to try. You have to push the limit, or at least we looked at a website, right, and we thought the best way to put ads on there was, put these ad slots on the top and the right, wherever, right, and that maybe worked for us, for a traditional website. But now you have these social media or social networking sites, or even have blogs. How do you leverage what is really happening there and turn that into an ad model, right? And yeah, the easy way up. Put a 468 on there, done, okay, make some impressions, get a few clicks. But to really be successful, I think, with MySpace marketing or with blog marketing, you have to stop and take a look and say, okay, what's really happening here, and how can I join the conversation instead of interrupt the conversation? And it's tough. It's a tough thing to figure
Can you
out.
think of some other examples where companies have done it well versus done it poorly?
Well, I think Microsoft, because I'm in this business, I apologize for using my own examples, but I'm not trying to push my service at all. But we did a user-generated campaign for Microsoft, and it was pretty successful, and they thought it was successful. And when I say successful, it wasn't that they got 1 million users to the service. It was successful in the standpoint it accomplished what they wanted. So the idea was to create a game using a Visual Studio Express, and they reached out to 5 bloggers who they were reaching the tech community, and they said, well, look, we want you guys to run essentially a promotion, which was this: you 5 bloggers create a Visual Studio Express game, and please don't say that I'm doing this because I like it versus I'm being paid to do this. So just be upfront about it. So they did it. These bloggers created the game, and what then happened was the bloggers went to their community and say, hey, here's my game that I created. Either take my game and enhance it and let me know what you did with it, or create your own. And if you create your own, let me know and I'll post it to my blog. And you can obviously post it to your own blog. And if you do that, you know what? We're going to do a drawing for an Xbox, right? So what happened was it generated a lot of interest from people creating these games. But then the exciting thing was the people who created games actually talked about the ad campaign, saying, oh, this wasn't a 468 by 60. This was something kind of fun. I knew it was Microsoft. Nobody was trying to fool me, but it worked well with, one, I'm a tech geek. Two, I read blogs, and three, it played along the whole idea that I can create a blog, post it to somebody that I have a strong affinity to, which was this, one of the 5 bloggers, and it got them engaged, and that's really what we're trying to do, right? That's what we need to do more of, instead of just talking to our customers, right? We need to interact with them.
I think in terms of, it wasn't necessarily revenue, but one of the better corporate blogs, which I think it's changed, interestingly enough, changed the way how regular news or tech news reporters cover companies, and that's what Yahoo does with a lot of their search development news and their search blog. They hardly ever put press releases out anymore. If you want to find out what's going on at Yahoo in terms of search technology, you go to the blog first. You do not look on the press release site or anything like that.
Why do you think that is? Why use that medium as opposed to?
It's because you're playing to your crowd, the people who are following you, whether they're developers who are looking at that, advertisers who are trying to understand what's happening with Yahoo's search technology, et cetera. It's a fairly effective way to get the message out. Now, and it's as I said, that's typically where the news breaks. Then they kind of will later move things through the standard kind of press release cycle.
Right. So is this capability really available for all segments? Is this concept of reaching out, building a brand for yourself, building an interesting content site that can actually potentially generate revenue, change society, influence people, whatever your motivations may be? Does it only apply to certain segments, or does it apply across the board?
I think you can apply across the board.
Across the board.
3 weeks, 4 weeks ago. Who's here? Who's not seen The Secret Diary of Steve Jobs? You have to go look for The Secret Diary of Steve Jobs. It's The Secret Diary of Steve Jobs and I don't know. I hope we never find out who writes that, because it's one of the most entertaining blogs I've ever read, and I always try to make time to do it. And there's always it literally is supposed to be written by Jobs. This person, whoever's writing this, is probably being contacted already, either as to be brought on as a regular contributor or something, but it is spot on. And 3 weeks ago, I'd never heard of it. And I think it's only been up for about 4 weeks right now as a site, but it's immediately gone to the top. So I think that's an example of where something can come out of nowhere, and we still actually don't know who the person is that's writing this. And I think that can go ahead.
Look, I was going to say, look at the Mentos and Coke, Diet Coke thing that went crazy, right? And these guys are now on. They were on David Letterman, and now they got Then Mentos took advantage of that situation and built upon it. Instead of saying, "What are you doing? You're using my brand in your video, and it's being syndicated all over the place," right? That old mentality.
Until somebody from sales said, "God, look how many Mentos we're selling."
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Is everybody familiar with the Diet Coke Mentos phenomenon? Basically, what happens is if you take Mentos, the candy, drop them into Diet Coke, that actually you can create this Old Faithful of a fountain. And it really took off in connection with these two guys that created this incredible video clip on YouTube, where they used something like, I don't know, hundreds of gallons of Coke and thousands of Mentos. And it's orchestrated to music, and it's phenomenal. If you ever get a spare moment, go to YouTube, put in Diet Coke and Mentos. You won't believe what these guys have created.
Well, to add to that, just real quickly, is now they created this video, and they did something unique, unique content, and they got a bunch of press about it, and now they got hired by someone recently to create more, right? And we'll see if the next ones are as funny as this one, but they got hired to create more of these types of videos that essentially, and I don't know if it was, I can't remember the company name, but it was pretty successful for them.
You had a quick...
Sure, there's another one I saw tonight, actually. It's like Coke Mentos Rocket, and supposedly you stick Mentos in the shape of Coke up, and you stab it in the ground, and it'll
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I think that sounds like basically the Trial Lawyers Association sending that one out. I mean, somebody's gonna get killed with that.
I mean, there's a whole, just an incredible cross-section of people who can take advantage of this from, I mean, I'll talk about our network for a second, but we have bloggers that are 85 years old in our network and talking about issues for the elderly, and we have a 14-year-old blogger who runs Wirecatcher. It's actually Jeff Jarvis's son, and he runs a tech blog where he reviews gadgets and that sort of thing. And at the same time, we do a lot of work with publishers. These guys are looking at creating live classifieds where they take existing classifieds customers, small, medium business, and give them the opportunity to start building a blog. The lawyer offering legal advice within reason. The golf pro offering golf tips, all sort of oriented around their sites as kind of a new model for the classifieds, or at least in addition to the existing classifieds business that they have. So, I mean, it is truly starting to democratize the whole thing.
Right. So let's sort of expand upon the Diet Coke Mentos phenomenon for a second, and really start to think about, and this is where we can take off, we won't be counting, we won't be keeping counting longer of the word Web 2.0 or mashups, but how much does new media, Web 2.0, new capabilities of delivery, I mean, how much does that change this? Does it stick everything on steroids, or is it just a little more entertainment and likely to kind of burn out?
It changes everything.
How so?
Well, I brought up the example already of the ability, that editors have to layer in this external content, to take advantage. I mean, when you think about it, each piece of unique content, whether it's Diet Coke and Mentos, or if it's, Rocket Boom, or if it's, some other, is a piece of content or a perspective, and each piece of content has an entertainment factor that they can be, delivered to an audience. And so this whole idea of taking piecemeals, gems of cool content on the internet and exposing it to your audience is now something that is available for everybody. It's something that you can easily do through current technologies, and I think that certainly changes the game for. It's what we see with Craigslist, and it's what we're seeing with lots of new medias in their embracing of RSS.
You don't think it creates one-hit wonders?
Oh, it totally does. But it's a piece of information that you use for a little bit of time, and then until the next thing comes along. But you're always staying on top of, the latest and greatest, hottest stuff, and you can use it for however long you want to, and then move on. I mean, it's like a great news story, except this time it's a podcast, or it's a video, or it's some viral game like a dancing chicken that takes takes instructions from the it's just a piece of something that you can expose to your audience and then move on.
But as far as building a brand, do you think it's sustainable?
Absolutely.
Individuals?
Yeah.
Sort of constantly out there. I mean, you had raised the point a little bit earlier, Mike. I mean, the two guys that have the Diet Coke Mentos video. What have we seen from them of late? I mean, how do they build that huge personal brand, or is are they one-hit wonders?
Those guys aren't building a brand. I mean, maybe they're going to get hired by Jolly Rancher to do something with, I don't know, some other drink. But as far as the big guys, you were talking about, the bigger players in the space, they're just going to use this content, willy-nilly. They're going to use it and then throw it away and get the next best thing as it comes along. It's definitely going to be one-hit wonders for the smaller guys, but that's the churning, bubbling long tail, right? You find the greatest stuff, you expose it, bubbles up to the top, and then it goes away.
But you'll definitely have the one-hit wonders. Totally agree with that. But I think there's real business to be had as we move forward. I mean, if you look at some of the new products and services that are coming out around social media, like the guys who started ShopWiki, or what Pepper Jam is doing with e-commerce, it's pretty fascinating. They're creating a community, right? It's the local bazaar coming back, right, online. And it's so funny to sit here and talk about this now. It's like the stuff that we're doing today, we should have been doing that all along, because we called the first half, or let me say it again, 1.0 interactive, but wow, 2.0 is really interactive, and it's obvious stuff. It's like, why didn't I think of a permalink, right? Why didn't I think of a trackback, or what about adding comments to my content, right, and make those available, right? The old world said, well, yeah, you can comment, but no one else is going to see those, right? They're going to go into a black hole that probably no editor is ever going to read, but at least I gave you the ability to comment, right? Well, now these comments are becoming public, just obvious little stuff to get us engaged with that person who's writing that story, because that was the whole problem. I could pick up a magazine and read it on, and touch it and feel it. I don't have that same interaction. Or, I as I'm walking down the street of my small town, I say, oh, I know that editor who wrote this story because he eats at the same coffee shop I have. Well, when it's online, it changes it. So what is the equivalent of that? We all need personal interaction, right? It feeds us. So that's what gets me excited about where we're going in things, and I say we, where the web is going now, is this really interactivity that's happening, and taking a look at how to make things better and how to engage the consumer just a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big difference between, Craigslist. That is the Craigslist effect, right? I mean, that's,
absolutely.
Craigslist brings interactivity, brings timeliness, brings relevancy to classifieds, to that experience, whereas, the old media didn't have it. It was kind of a broadcast and clumsy.
Right.
Or it seems clumsy now.
So where's the frontier? I mean, what's next on the horizon as far as building brands? I mean, is it that production studio in the garage because the quality of the video clip or the podcast has to keep going up and up? What's the frontier? Where's the greenfield out there for somebody who wants to build that brand?
I don't think, if you're asking where the edge of the horizon is, I really can't see it at this point, right? The tools continue to get better. I think you saw any of the previews on what Apple's doing with Leopard, with some of the tools they're putting there. And what they've already done with things like GarageBand are substantial in terms of what it gives a non-professional consumer or individual the ability to create and publish.
Or if you look at Deuce and extrapolate that, where, or not Deuce, I'm sorry, Rocket Boom, where she created her own TV show, right? How long was it? A couple, whatever. Let's call it 15 minutes. She created a 15-minute show. And I think we'll see a lot more of that, great content. So what that means is, again, all these individuals creating great content, someone's going to have to aggregate that content and create their own television show. And that's really what's happening, is where I see it anyway, is I leverage RSS to do that. So I can grab a piece of content over here and maybe a video over here and a podcast over here and create my own daily newspaper. It's me who's saying what I want, and I assemble that in my RSS news aggregator every day, and that's the first thing that I read. I don't pick up my local newspaper or even the national newspaper. I take everything that's available to me and I create my own. And I think we'll see a lot of that. But I'm working right now on a personal project with this person who's a TV personality, and she's leveraging what she's created on TV to create her own, basically, television show. And it's pretty freaking fascinating. It's a really exciting project that she's doing, and it's really going to flip. It's taking this user-generated media and saying, well, wait a minute, I don't need a TV network anymore, right? Yes, the TV network helped her get exposure and people will recognize her, but in the case of Rocket Boom, she's saying, you know what, I busted my butt and I still didn't make it on the 10 o'clock news, so I'm going to do it myself. And I think we'll see a lot of that moving forward.
I think mobile is certainly an unexplored avenue for a lot of this stuff. I mean, we've been talking about, different use cases and different interaction models for, Web 2.0 type of experiences that we're seeing these days, but, really expressing that via mobile, which is, what all the cool kids are doing these days. They're using their phones for more and more stuff, and I think the experience on the phone is just going to get better and better, and it's going to get more and more integrated, certainly from an interaction and content standpoint.
No one's really solved the platform problem yet either, right? So there are a dizzying array of capabilities. You described the tools getting better. Am I going to put dig thumbs up, thumbs down on users' content and everything else? Am I going to add syndication capabilities through RSS to this platform? Am I going to bring in commentary associated with frames in a video? How am I going to handle the SEO side of things? There's so many moving parts right now and so many people inventing as they go, so many little companies popping up here and there. I think that there'll be a period of sort of maturity that'll happen over the next couple of years, and you'll start to see a more generally accepted set of capabilities that will become kind of the gold standard. Today it's, I have a blog, maybe it's a typepad blog, whatever it might be, I can do comments off that blog and I can produce a feed, but it's quickly, with the ability to drop in widgets of capability on different websites, growing into something that's much more integrated and sophisticated, or it has the ability to start doing that.
Sure. One last question for each of the panelists. As you look out into the, sort of the future with these new capabilities coming out, we touched on a little bit earlier this notion of, one-hit wonders. Does a corporation effectively have to aggregate all of this? You look out 2, 3, 5 years from now, the individual, can they still build a brand, or is it a corporate issue? Walker?
Can the individual still bring it? Yes, always. I mean, there's always going to be opportunity. There's always going to be the long tail. There's always going to be a chance for, people to step up and do something unique and differentiating, and that's, that's unique, really. That gets them noticed, and they may become a one-hit wonder, but there's always going to be that long tail. So yeah.
Eric?
We'll still have the same complaints we do today about haves and have-nots, and there'll be some group of folks that sort of dominate attention, but the ability to grow from one group into the other, and I think that's what you were getting at too, Walker, is if you are able to produce consistently interesting and valuable content, you're able to market yourself intelligently and get a little lucky at the same time, you have the ability to grow for sure.
Yeah.
Bill?
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
I think so, but I think in the next several years, let's say 5 years, I'll always be able to put my brand out there. As I get more of these tools, though, I think there's going to be an increased tension between what I or any of us can do as individual creators and basically what the rights holders of the world, the media companies, and by that I mean the copyright regime we all live with today, is going to put some kinks in that for a while. I don't think any of us are going to want to, I'm not talking about advocating ripping entire TV shows or albums and putting them on your blog. I'm talking about my ability to get a couple of samples to illustrate a entry in a blog or in a podcast. And I think that's going to be an issue for the foreseeable future.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a frontier that a lot of people don't necessarily really appreciate today, is basically the rights of the original sort of content providers.
Yep.
So let's open up to some questions for the panelists. Any questions out there?
We answered them all.
It's late.
Wow.
It is late, maybe so.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes.
You mentioned, I think it was Eric who mentioned that in the survey, the bloggers put the third motivation for blogging as making money. Me, as a personally as a blogger, and I was trained as a journalist, I feel like, since I used to get paid $3,000, $4,000 to write an article, that my blog is worth more money than somebody who wasn't trained as a journalist. And so I got really excited, and I put Google AdWords on my blog. I'm going to make money. I hear that people are making $15,000 a month on their blog, and I was so excited. 2 years later, I've made $10. And I have one of the top, in my category, I'm in the top 10 in my category, according to keywords, in Technorati. I mean, I actually have like a top blog, and I'm making money. So when people say that that's their third motivation, maybe that's because they know they're not going to make any money. And that's why they put that.
Well, you're looking at it, you're using the wrong way to monetize your content.
I don't know if everybody heard, but it's more or less, is the reason that the third motivation for bloggers is making money, it's number 3 on the list, is because there really isn't that much expectation. It's very difficult, effectively, to make money, even for A-list bloggers.
Yeah, you can't even pay your electric bill.
Not at $10 a month.
You can't even pay for your DSL.
Exactly.
But when I always hear Google AdSense really works well when it's all about performance, or you have volume of content and scale, right? Your content, you may only have 50 readers, let's say, right? I have no idea. Let's just say it's 50 readers, right? Those 50 readers are pretty loyal to you, right? And if you're in a niche and you're not just talking about your life in general, and if you're the top, 10?
I was in the top 10.
In the top 10, well, your content in that particular niche is pretty valuable. I'm not surprised you only made $10 in the last 2 years on Google AdWords. You have to appeal to marketers and advertisers and say, look, I'm the top 10 in this category. I write about this niche. Find those advertisers who want to speak and reach to those people, right? And it's not sold on a cost per click. It's sold, hey, sponsor my site. There's a I'm forgetting names, a site, a woman who writes about wireless in cities and towns, and that's her whole focus is just that, helping small towns. Muni Wireless, maybe it's called. Anyway, that's all she writes about, right? Helping small towns get wireless infrastructures. She makes one little ad spot that's a 120 by 90 to sponsor is $30,000, and she is sold out, right? Now she's reaching a pretty darn good audience, right? No, I mean I can't help her. She did a phenomenal job on her own. Just she was trained as a professional. She's writing her own blog. She's focused on a particular piece of content, and she knows her audience really well. She's appealing to small town government agencies. Well, who is trying to? I mean, IBM is one of her sponsors, right? Because they want to reach the government. The people making the decisions at that level. So,
I mean, running a blog is running a small business, and so exactly. So someone who maybe comes from a pure writing background doesn't have a strong business sense or a sense of marketing, or maybe has been struggled with that in the past because they were more of a journalist is a good example. We meet people like this all the time. They don't always do well because they really have to think through ways to get beyond the kind of build it and they will come model.
Fair enough. We're starting to get the hook here. So one last question, sure.
Just jumping off sort of the top 3 blog usage issue, I'm wondering where community building fits into that equation. If bloggers consider building just sort of a general loyalty to a site or a general, I'm coming from the perspective of a nonprofit with disseminating public health information. And so I'm just wondering, I don't care about selling something, I care about being the source of information. And I'm just wondering how blogs fit into that sort of mindset.
Absolutely. So in our survey, the same question we asked about what motivated them, number one answer was to inform and entertain, but other answers that were in the top 5 or 10 were certainly answers like to meet people and be part of a community. That's one kind of socialization. The other one is to build credibility for myself as an author or a subject matter expert or thought leader, if you will. All of those are very highly ranked. And it's much more about that kind of personal growth and personal sense of self-worth.
Right. I don't know what the organizers are going to do. Why don't we go ahead and just take one truly last question. Go ahead.
This question is for Eric. I have a question about your 2,000 blog network. There's obviously different ways to design syndication. Is this traditional wire service syndication, essentially where anything that's written is automatically appears in these 2,000 blogs? Is it more along just mutual links to 2,000 blogs, or is it just that you're sending these out and they're accepting it, which is more of a traditional mailing list?
Actually, the other way. So the bloggers who are part of our network, as they post, their content flows into our network, and then we then drive that content onto mainstream publisher sites. So you can go to the San Francisco Chronicle today, go to their tech section, and you'll see blog content right there in their section head, and you'll see it in the travel section where there's blog posts showing up there, fully attributed, links back to the original bloggers to drive traffic, to build their brand, if you will, on those sites. And it's really about taking the millions of users on those websites and exposing that readership to blogs.
So you're syndicating smaller blogs to larger sites?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I want to thank the panelists for participation today. I thought it was, hopefully you found it interesting as well.